So, Paul, is your proposal to use the Bank of Canada a completely new idea?
Absolutely not. It's an old idea. And this is one of the advantages of being, mature years. You've seen it all before. We used the Bank of Canada very creatively from 1939 to 1974. And it actually created very large sums of near zero cost money for the government of Canada through all that period. And this was the money, and it was backed 100% by the governor of the bank, who was a very bright, brilliant person, really, Graham Towers. It was used to get us out of the Great Depression and to help finance the World War II. And, in 1938, there were no jobs in Canada, and then along comes the war, and pretty soon everybody's working in the armed forces or building factories or making munitions and so on. And you may say, well, where did that money come from? Well, the Bank of Canada printed it, printed. And then it was spent into circulation and wound up in the private banks, where it was called what the economists called high-powered money. And that was their monetary reserve to help expand the private banking system so they could make loans to people who were building factories and so on. Well, this system of the Bank of Canada providing near zero cost money lasted from 1939 right on through until 1974. So it was used for the post-war infrastructure to build the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, great new airport terminals, new ports, and the Dew Line, which would be a mystery to people your age, but that was a distant early warning radar line that went right around our country. And it was very expensive. And it was all paid with the help of the Bank of Canada providing the government with this near zero cost money. Well, then it also was used to establish our Social Security system, which was one of the envies of the world at the time. 1974, unfortunately, the governor of the bank unilaterally, without consulting the Prime Minister or saying what he was doing, changed the system and made the government start borrowing in the market at market rates, high interest rates. Well, what happened, of course, is that the two recessions they brought on put us into a situation of having to borrow money because the tax revenues weren't adequate to pay expenses. And first thing we knew, the debt was building up. It was rolled over into debt. And in the years since 1974, when the governor and the Bank of Canada abandoned their shareholders, that's us, and started taking orders from Switzerland, from the Bank for International Settlements, we, the Canadian people, from fiscal 74-75 to fiscal 2014-15, have had to pay $1.17 trillion, not billion, not million, $trillion in interest, none of which was necessary. And it's just a crying shame. It was really, a terrible, terrible thing to do. But that's what's happened to us, and we're still doing it. Not only that, we accumulated $615 billion in debt federally, and probably as much provincially and municipally, and we're still paying it, and there's no way to pay it off. And it's getting worse rather than better. So what we're proposing in the social contract between the government and the people of Canada is that we use a slightly more sophisticated means of doing exactly what was done then, of having the Bank of Canada come to the rescue, of creating, in this case, debt-free money rather than low-cost money, and putting it into circulation so that we can get the system up and running, and so that this generation, will be your generation and your friends and your colleagues, will have a future too.